Hi, my name's Arrow. I go by they, them pronouns, and today is World Mental Health Day, so I just wanted to talk a little bit about some more of my experiences with mental health and talking about more specific things. So I'm going to be doing several different videos talking about those things and going into a little bit more detail than I did in my one video that I made, or I guess two videos, where I just like spilled my guts about like mental illness and shit. So this video we're going to be addressing my experience with self-harm. The next is going to be talking about my experience with therapy, and the third is going to address my relationship with medication. So first of all, we're going to talk about my experiences with self-harm, and I've been wanting to make this video especially because I have a poem that I want to release that talks a bit more about self-harm, and I just wanted to so I've been thinking about posting that, and also because it's currently the beginning of October, but as of the second week in September, I'm officially 3 years self-harm free. So that's pretty cool, and I wanted to kind of talk about that and celebrate that. So yeah, so I talked a bit about it in my mental illness video, but basically it was in like probably around 2013, the beginning of 2013, when I started self-harming. And yeah, originally I was really affected by stigma around mental health, and I really tried to hide everything that I was going through, but I needed some sort of coping mechanism, and I didn't really have access to any healthy ones. Like, I didn't understand how to do that properly, and I'd been doing healthier coping mechanisms, like trying to, exercise or, do yoga, but I wasn't really committed to it, and I wasn't really working on actually processing my thoughts and stuff. So yeah, so I started to kind of like turn to pain as a way to deal with things. And originally I didn't realize I was self-harming because I only thought of self-harm as cutting. But yeah, so I had started to like chew on my gums when I was bored, which I did all the time, but I realized that when things were really bad, if I like really bit down and was like pulling off pieces of the inside of my gums, it kind of gave me something to focus on. And that pain, I was kind of like, made me feel like just like I had something that was kind of expressing how I was feeling inside, kind of translated to a physical sense. And so, yeah, so I was doing that for a while, and then I realized it was self-harm, and that also kind of gave me a feeling of validation, like, oh, I am really struggling, because you can see a physical result of it, which is a very dangerous mentality to have, because it kind of encourages self-mutilation. And so, yeah, I basically didn't notice that, and I started to want to have something else that I could see instead of just like feel on the inside of my mouth. So I started to like push pins into my legs, which made it harder to start self-injecting for testosterone. But it's a very different scenario. So once I started to because it would remind me of when I used to do that. But it is different, and I don't really think about that now. But because I self-inject in my thighs. But anyway, so I do that, but it wasn't really the right sort of sensation. So I ended up turning to pinching primarily, and so I would pinch my wrists, and this was also a bit of a cry for help, because I wanted to be heard around that, and I thought that people might notice, but also it was subtle enough that I felt like safe in the way that people won't notice what it is. But I also use this whole concept as a way to kind of talk down to myself as well, because I would kind of like have the thought of, oh, like no one cares enough to notice, which is ridiculous because I was really, really hiding them. Even though I did have, they were there, like I made sure that they didn't look like self-harm than most people thought. I was young too, so I don't know how many people would have considered that, especially because I seemed perfectly happy and like all the other ways. And you know, I would make sure that there wasn't too many in the same place or stuff like that. And the fact that it was kind of secretive made me feel like almost cowardly, because I wasn't like, it made me feel like, oh, you know, you're too much of a coward to do real self-harm and like cutting and stuff. So that was a way to further kind of target myself, I guess. And there was times where I was like, I really, really, like I had a lot of, you know, fantasies all the time of like actually cutting, but it was something that I never did. And part of that was something that I'd be like, oh, like I'm happy about that, I'm glad about that. And then I would also turn that on myself as well. And like, oh, you know, you're so stuck and so committed to hiding and destroying yourself further through hiding that you'll do it this way. And then I also did a few times where I'd scratch like my skin and make it look like, almost look like there was bug bites, but there wasn't any. And basically that caused several scars on my wrist as well, but they're mostly faded, and the pinching would go through my skin and cause scars as well, but they would usually only last, like they would heal, they'd cause like sometimes bruises and like marks, and the marks would last anywhere from like probably like a couple days to a month. Also, something I did mention is I did end up cutting once eventually, but I found it wasn't as satisfying, so as pinching, so I kind of went back to that. But anyways, something else I wanted to mention is I'll talk more about my tattoo later. I might do a video on all of the meaning that it has, but basically I've got a tattoo. And around the semicolon I have these two marks here and there and there, and that's meant to represent the scars and the marks I'd have from pinching. And the reason I got that tattooed is also a part of my whole idea of vulnerability that comes with the tattoo, but it also is related to having that be the last mark of self-harm that is on my body, and this does not represent self-harm. It represents healing and strength and moving forward. So it's a mark that represents that, but it's also a mark that is meant to look like the marks that I had from self-harm. So it also is that, but it's going to be the last mark, a last trace of self-harm that's on my body, that I ever put on my body, is the idea behind that. Something I want to talk about this and clarify about this is, yes, I'm talking about the ways in which I kind of hid my self-harm, and because I was really paranoid of anyone finding out. Like, even if I did something like self-harming on my chest or my legs, I'm like, sometime someone will see me and they'll be like, why aren't you wearing a bikini or something? And so someone would find out from that, which is ridiculous. But yeah, but the thing about hiding self-harm is I don't want anyone to take this as like a guide, like a how-to kind of thing, at all. Because if there's one thing to take from my experiences is to not hide. Because hiding and not talking about my experiences was the worst decision I've ever made in my life. And so, yeah, I want people to know that it's really, really important to reach out and get help, and also that there is hope to stop, because it is a very addicting thing, and it can be really hard to stop, and it can be easy to feel shame for it. So it's not something you should, like, should is an awful word when discussing mental health, but it's not something you need to be ashamed of. Like, it is a coping mechanism, but there's also better coping mechanisms, and it's something you can stop, and it's something that feels good when you stop, eventually. But yeah, so I just wanted to talk a bit about that. So that's all. And yeah, so yeah. Anyways, have a great day.